Welcome back. We are Gentlemen United, and you are in the man cave. Parental alienation can be described as the process and the result of psychological manipulation of a child into showing unwarranted fear, disrespect, or hostility towards a parent and or other family members. It's a distinctive form of psychological abuse and of family violence towards both the child and the rejected family members. Now, according to the Canadian Association for Equality, Canadians grant custody to mothers 78% of the time and child support orders 96% of the time. In the US, mothers have custody 82% of the time versus 18% for fathers, according to the United States Census Bureau. My guests today are Jeff Morton and Brandon Johnson. Now, quick intro. Jeff Morton's from Dallas, Texas, served in the U.S. Army and was a missionary to Iraqi refugees in Jordan. He was a volunteer for Rick Santorum during the 2012 and 2016 elections. After a tumultuous breakdown of his marriage and then breakdown in the relationship with his daughter and her boyfriend, he has found himself alienated from his grandchildren. Brandon Johnson, who also joined us, got divorced in 2011 and remarried in 2016. He's a roofer and general contractor with 2 kids from his first marriage, 1 boy 9 and 1 girl 7. After his divorce, he had no issues with custody arrangements, but 2 years ago, all of that changed. Active at the Texas State Capitol advocating for an equal parenting bill, participating in the Million Parent March in D.C. in September, and joined Gabriel on his march from Houston to Austin to protest the Texas state laws on the absence of due process that allows paternity fraud to continue. Trigger warning. If discussing parental alienation is going to offend you, I'll pause for a moment and invite you to stop watching right now and go on to the next YouTube clip. This will likely be too much for some people to handle. Okay, with that out the way, let's go on. As always, for those watching this live broadcast on YouTube, feel free to add your comments and questions in the comment bar. I'll watch for them throughout the show and will incorporate them into the show, time permitting. Joining me are Jeff Morgan, Brandon Johnson, of course, you, our viewers. I'm Sean Best. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for joining me, guys. Tell us a bit about yourselves and why the topic of parental alienation is such a sensitive topic to you personally. I mean, what is the emotional impact on you and your children? Brandon, let's start with you.
I want to just preface it by saying, from a technical standpoint, I would not be considered an alienated parent because I do have access to my children. And another thing that I have done is we were at Jeff and I and Gabriel were at the Texas Capitol last week, talking with Ken Paxton and his deputy assistant Andrew Leone about all the issues that affect Texas parents. And from my perspective, I get what I call 4 days a month and 2 hours a week. And that's way more than some of these other parents get. And it's heartbreaking to hear their stories about not getting to see their children at all. But from my perspective, 4 days a month is an unacceptable amount of time to see my children. And that's not an adequate amount of time to be a father to my children. And that's what got me upset. And about a year and a half ago, I had filed for a modification. Beginning of my separation divorce, I had full access to my kids, the way normal people would be able to see their children. I could get them, as a roofer, I work odd hours. If it's raining, I have a day off, and sometimes of the year I'm working daylight to dark, and other times of the year, I may not be working at all. And my ex-wife was very accommodating to that. I could get the kids after school. I could keep them overnight. If I was busy working on a weekend, we would alternate the weekends. Essentially, I had never looked at my divorce decree until one day she says, "Hey, we need to get on a schedule." And I said, "Now, wait a minute, we are on a schedule. This is how you're supposed to operate to have I couldn't have asked for anyone else, anybody better to work with. But then she says, no, we need a schedule, and we need the court-ordered schedule. And I said, wait a minute, that's not going to work. This is insane. And for a year and a half, I was held to that schedule. And I'm like a lot of men, I had vowed to never get married again. But I met a very wonderful woman, Jana, and she, how the deal goes, Sean. Hey, where are we at? What are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
I said, no, I'm checking out. You need to move down the road, that's fine, but I'm not doing that. But this woman has been a godsend, and she has treated my kids as her own. She's moved to Mineral Wells, and I re-entered the court system. In that process, I got remarried. I finally gave in. I said, hey, you know what? This would be better for everybody. And I'll be honest, it was selfish reasons that I got initially, but now I'm telling you, it couldn't be any better. She moved out to where I live. We're within a mile of my children. And I said, look, I'm not going to be held to 4 days a month with my kids. We filed the modification. I was given temporary, what people know as expanded standard. That's where you actually get Thursday after school to drop off at Monday at school. Okay, and you don't realize that. I had no idea either, but that's a huge amount of time that you get to spend with your kids, because as parents, we get to spend time with our kids after school in the evening. That's when you build your bond, not for 2 hours on a Thursday night where you're having to rush around, pick them up, and then drop them off. There's just not enough time to build a relationship.
Right.
I went to court in February. They took that away from me, and now I'm back to being on the verge of what a lot of people, I can see how people get alienated. I really can, because of that lack of time with your kids. You go nuts.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir, I know. All right, let me go quickly over to Jeff and get a bit about your story, Jeff.
Okay, mine's a little bit different there, Sean. As you mentioned, I had been, our family were missionaries in the Middle East until 2004 among Iraqi refugees. We had a wonderful time there, but culture is different. Came back to the States, there were just a lot of things that we had to deal with. But anyway, one thing that I never expected to have to deal with was going through a divorce. I obviously, as a person in ministry and as a Christian person, I thought that this would never ever be in the cards. There were things that happened that caused some tensions, but I wanted to keep the family together. And nevertheless, when divorce was filed against me, it is what it is at that point. I was surprised to see the way the system actually, the laws in the state of Texas actually kind of abuse people through the whole process. The laws in Texas almost work to help destroy families and not to keep families together. And the family law attorneys definitely try to destroy families for the most part, because that's how they make their money. So I guess that was, after the divorce took place, a month or so later, my girls came up to me. Everybody was kind of mad at my ex-wife for a while there. Thought that, very upset with her. My one daughter said, I can't believe Mom destroyed the family in one short summer. Just a couple of things like that. But then during the divorce process, my daughter got pregnant. And these are one of the things we talk about, putting children at risk through the divorce process. This happens. Children, my youngest daughter got pregnant and she had a child. She was in the process of having the child. I'm like, what do I do as a father? As a missionary, it wasn't a high-paying job. So we had a house, but we didn't have a whole lot of other things. And the only thing I could think of to do was to give everything up, so that my girls would have a chance to go to college, and my youngest daughter especially have a place to stay with her child. And then, there were things that happened. My ex-wife wanted to throw her out. My ex-wife, by the way, met somebody, I think 17 days later, and they were Facebook friends. They were married 10 months after the divorce. This all craziness. But anyway, what happened after that is that, still had a relationship, at least to some degree, with my kids. In 2015, April of 2015, I was working out of state, and my youngest daughter now had a second son, because when she was living with my ex-wife, made things difficult for her, and she went back to her old boyfriend, got pregnant, and just, again, a mess upon a mess. So I had been watching both of my grandchildren extensively during this time, but then she asked another man to come in and live with her, and during that time, he convinced her that I was bad for them. As a dad who was a little bit more protective, I guess, I was bad for their relationship. And she took my youngest grandson and got him circumcised at 10 and a half months of age. It got infected. So she asked me, Dad, can I have the insurance information? And I told her to take him into the doctors. I said, just take him in, because I love this little boy. And some of the things that, John, when you talk about these things, you can be, you can be a little bit, take the emotions out of them for the most part in your life, but sometimes you go back to them, and that's when all the emotions come up again. And so my daughter called me and asked if my wife would go down and help her with the children. My daughter's mom lives in the area, but she didn't call her. She called me, and she asked if my wife would go down and help her. So that's what we did. But then during this time that she was in the hospital because of the circumcision being infected, the hospital called Children's Protective Services. And Children's Protective Services came to her house the day after she was discharged with my grandson, and basically wanted to investigate her for either neglect, potential or actual neglect and abuse. And during this whole thing, I got blamed. Children's Protective Services would not exonerate me, would not tell them, even though they knew I had nothing to do with it. They let my daughter believe that somehow I was involved in this. She eventually filed a protective order against me, filed a false police report against me, and it's been about 2.5 years now since I've seen my grandchildren. My grandchildren used to practically live over here. My youngest grandson took his first steps walking to me. And my other grandson wanted to go to church with my daughter and the kids. He'd jump out of her, just jump out, come running to me to see me, because, we just had that type of a strong relationship. And, so it was because of Children's Protective Services, helping the children, protecting the children, destroying a family, that I haven't been able to see my grandkids. And obviously when your daughter sues you and tries to get you thrown into jail as a felon, and tries to ruin your career and everything else, that creates some tensions and some difficulties.
Oh my goodness, that's like a landslide of issues, one after the other, and all. Yeah. So, all right.
Hey, Sean, let me put a little bit more context into this too. My wife, Karen, she has. We have my stepson, her middle son, was born, and when he was born dead and resuscitated. He's 26 years old. He lives with us. He has extreme medical needs, and he's got 24-hour nursing care. Our lives are pretty much around him. He's got the master suite and everything else. We live upstairs in a bedroom above the garage. But had my daughter been successful in winning this case, which she did not win, but had that been the case, I mean, you could imagine the ramifications, because primarily, my insurance provides primary insurance for my stepson. Just one thing after another. And then when the trial takes place, lo and behold, my ex-wife gets up there, commits perjury left, right, and center. And by the way, the judge told me I had to say apparent perjury, because it hasn't gone to that, I haven't been able to let people see it yet. But the reality is that at this point in time, not only have I not seen my grandchildren for 2.5 years, then the way my daughter told the story, she was able to, I guess, spin it in such a way that my son and my daughter haven't talked to me now for 2 years as well. So it's one of these things that has just been heartbreaking. But my grandchildren is the one. As you'll see, I've got the grandparenting shirt. Grandparent is a verb. I love my grandchildren, still do. And that's why I fight for everything, because I do not want to see this happen to them. And I want to tell them in the future, I believe that we are going to, that this will be solved. But I want to tell them, Cruz and Gideon, it's because of you. It's because of you two and what we went through that things are better for people in the state of Texas. And that's why I fight.
If you enjoyed the show and want to see more, join our Facebook page called The Man Cave by Gentlemen United. All of our shows, tons of additional content, and invitations to future shows are posted there. You can add to the conversation and suggest future discussion topics. Please like, comment, share, and most of all, subscribe by clicking the Gentlemen United icon. I promise it's free. Thanks again for joining us in. Good night.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in the Man Cave.